I have a question for you. When was the last time that you just went for a walk? A long walk? Walking, for me, was one of the most transformative things that happened in my late teens. It really helped shift my unemployed, sedentary, very overweight self towards a better headspace, one step at a time, literally. I've spoken before on this show about how powerful I can find a simple walk around the block. I've even taken you on one of these walks where I did my best to name every tree or bird or leaf with, I'm sure I missed a million, but 10 short minutes can absolutely change my day if I notice things like that. But what about a really long walk? But what's longer than a long walk? I guess a hike. What's longer than a hike? That would be a trek. How long is a trek? I guess a trek is where you just walk in one direction as far as you can until you hit the ocean. And that is what my guest today did. In 2019, Sophie Matterson had a desire for a different kind of life, a desire that led her to set an audacious goal to walk across the width of Australia, covering an astounding 5,000 kilometres from Shark Bay in Western Australia all the way to Byron Bay in New South Wales. But Sophie did not walk alone. Oh no. She was joined on this journey by her 5 camels. And together, they faced life and death situations. They braved harsh weather conditions. They overcame the challenges of solitude and going weeks without encountering another soul. Sophie's journey was not just about conquering the physical terrain. It was also a quest for self-discovery and personal growth, which she writes about in her glorious memoir. It's called The Crossing. And Sophie learned a lot on that adventure. And today she shares just a few of the highs and lows, the challenges and the moments of not only heartbreak, but sheer wonder that defined this year-long odyssey. Odyssey is a good word. That's almost better than a trek, actually. Sophie, thank you so much for making time for me. It's extraordinary to speak to you because you have done something that people all over the world would dream of doing. You know, you've literally walked across Australia. You did it alone, well, kind of alone. You walked across with 5 camels, which is pretty beautiful. And if anyone's listening and they've tried to meditate, 5 minutes alone is an eon. When you first started meditating, not speaking to anyone for 5 minutes, not looking at your phone for 5 minutes is an eon. You did that for 5,000 kilometres.
It's a pretty deep meditation, that's for sure.
And that is something that I'm really, really interested in. My first camel I ever saw was at Victor Harbour. I think they're still there.
Oh, okay.
When we first came to Australia, we lived in Adelaide, and there's photos of me on the back of a camel on the sand.
I bet I know those people actually that have the camels because it's a small world and we all know one another.
The weird little train, the weird little tram that goes out to the little island there.
Yep.
And yeah, camels, they're colossal quadrupeds. They're enormous creatures. When you're 3, they're even bigger. You know, they're like a giraffe without the neck. They're absolutely massive bodied animals. When was the first time you saw a camel? You're from Brisbane. Like, was it the Echo? Where was it?
Well, I've got photos of when I was tiny, actually. Yeah, maybe about probably 3 or 4. Actually, no, probably a bit older, probably about 6 or so. And I've still got those photos. And I'm sitting on a camel. And it must have been, I think, just at a little carnival or something like that, or a little show that had come to Brisbane. And Mum took me and I went on a camel ride. And I barely even remembered that I had that experience. You know, it wasn't until sort of years down the track that I became fascinated with camels that we pulled out this old photo of me.
What part of Brisbane sorry for everyone listening, we're about to play the Queensland game. What part of Brisbane did you grow up in?
I grew up in partly out at Sanford, which is just sort of where it starts to go rural in Brisbane. So we had a couple of acres out there, and then partly in at Red Hill when my parents split up. So I would go between the two. So from a very early age, I think I was already travelling in a way. I was bouncing between houses all the time. Oh,
man. Like, were you doing the 5-2-2? What was the split?
Well, I sort of had a bizarre situation, actually. Originally, when Mum and Dad broke up, Mum bought a house across the road. but because, but because we were on acreage, it was, there was plenty of space.
Right.
So I used to just walk back and forth across the road whenever I felt like it,
Wow.
really. So it was great.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are you one of many? Are you by yourself?
I'm an only child.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is tough, man. I was 11 when my folks split up, and I'm one of four. So, there was some solidarity there, I guess, between us boys. But damn, that would have been.
It was actually, you know what, I think back to it, and I think they had probably the most amicable breakup of anyone I know.
Wow.
It was, they've always sort of both been there for me. They've never had trouble, both being at the same events together.
Yeah.
They, continue to support me in their own ways.
When you were at school, was there any inkling that, going solo on your feet across a nation, or going to the Middle East and wrangling camels was a part of it? Like, what was it when you were in high school? I'm going to grow up and be a vet. What was it?
No, not at all. So I went to girls' grammar in Brisbane, and it was quite a prestigious high school.
Oh, I know it. It was about 400 metres from my high school.
Oh, there you go. There we go. What school did you go to?
Well, not the one next door, the one the other road. Yeah.
Okay, right. Yeah. I know the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was all about, I remember at the time, about becoming, a doctor or a lawyer.
Fucking Brisbane.
It was pretty sort of, and I remember when I went off and did film and TV as a degree afterwards.
Wow.
And I sort of thought, oh, yeah, I really bucked the trend here for girls' grammar. I'm like the black sheep already.
Yeah.
And then when I went into Camels, I thought, oh, they'll never forgive me now.
What film and TV, was there for you? Did that you study in Queensland?
I went down to Byron actually, and I studied at SAE College in Byron. So it was pretty great, really. I surfed.
So that's a bit of an eye opener to go from Brizzo and kind of like semi-rural west, and then Blueyville. Well, I think Bluey's more Cooperoo, I think, out there, because the view from their house is impossible. You can't have the city in the background and the bridge in the foreground if you're on the west side. So yeah, I don't know. I think it might be Cooperoo-ish where the Bluey house is. I watch a lot of Bluey. But they do go out your way quite a bit. They do go out to Sanford and the Gap, and they're out that way quite a bit.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty good. They actually drove past the Gap Village shopping centre.
Sick. I'm going to have to get into Bluey.
Mate. Well, you would know, growing up in Brisbane, you just never see your own city anywhere on any Australian TV ever, except for Gold Coast Cops. You're like, okay, this is it. Yeah. And suddenly, here's like literally the highest rated, most viewed Australian thing that's ever been made in history, and it's all Brisbane, and there's City Cats, and there's the Story Bridge, and there's Q1.
Well, because I don't have kids, so I haven't been watching Bluey. But everyone that I know that has kids, they just love it. So
you don't need kids to watch Bluey.
Yeah, I've heard. So I really need to get into it.
You can write these down, and you'd appreciate this. The three I would say to you: everything you ever wanted to know about script writing and story writing, as in an episode called Curry Swap. Everything you wanted to know about cognitive behavioural therapy is in an episode called Space. And everything you ever wanted to know about healing childhood trauma, and I warn you, I cry twice every time I watch this show, and I've seen it 28 times, is a show called Space is the trauma one, and Stories is the CBT one. So it's...
Wow, they touch on everything. It's amazing.
Mate, it's unreal. Yeah, and everyone sees themselves as Bandit, which is the dad, which is why the other day there was an episode where he jumped on the scales and he grabbed his belly and went, oh, got to exercise a bit more.
That was the one episode that I have seen. I flicked the TV on, it was on that episode, yeah.
Well, let me tell you, like Homer Simpson's done that 500 times and no one gives a fuck, but we don't see ourselves in Homer. So it's fine, but we see ourselves in Bandit. And if you have a problem with your own body, and long story anyway. Well, so going from there to Byron, like say you're 18, 19, leashes off, what happened?
It just seemed natural to me in a way. Like I always, because I'd grown up, I wasn't actually born in Brizzy. I was born in Hong Kong. We then moved to Paris. Then we came to Australia. And then, like I said, then my parents split up, so I was always moving. And I did a lot of travelling when I was young too. And so I just always assumed that everyone after school would leave and go out to, you know, different parts of Australia or the world and do their things. And when I went down to Byron, I sort of thought, oh, that's strange. I seem to be the only one that has moved away from Brisbane.
Wow.
So it was kind of, I don't know, natural to me. But it was a great time. It was, I loved being by the ocean. I had a real love for the ocean. So
were your parents in finance? Like, was that it?
My dad was worked for the Hong Kong bank. So yes, that was the travel.
Yeah. Hong Kong, it's a tricky one. Yeah. So you left, were you there pre-handover?
Yes, we were.
Wow.
So it's a different place these days, I hear.
Yeah. What? I remember watching that on TV. I was doing the overnight shift in Brisbane, and I remember watching them hand the flag over, like proper colonial wildness. Yeah, it's what interesting. But what a perspective, though, to come to Brisbane with that under your belt, because Brizzo is an interesting spot, right? But to have your view of the world already be such a wide angle lens, and so the sounds of so many different languages in your ears, to then show up and, you know, hear people who speak through their nose when they say the letter E. Amazing. You know, so film and TV at SAE and Byron, like, are you thinking like, this is it? I'm the next Blue Tongue Films. I'm going to make the next version of Chopper. Like, what was the pathway?
Yeah, I think I was ambitious in a way, but it was kind of like I was ambitious, but I also just constantly had these itchy feet. And so after I finished SAE, I wanted to go traveling even more. Yeah. So I set off on this big trip. Well, before that, I'd set off on about a 5-month trip before I even went to uni. I took a gap year. Nice. And then after uni, I decided I wanted to go and work some ski seasons in Canada.
Nice.
So I went over to Whistler and I worked as a photographer on the slopes there, and then went to Vancouver Island and worked as a surf school photographer there. So I was just, you know, I wanted to do well in film and TV, but I also was constantly, wanted to see the world, and was, you know, never felt I was ready to settle down in a way.
Whistler's a wacky spot. I think I went there 20 years ago, and I busted my ACL. But I think it was that year that I went, of the, say if there were 1,000 working visas that went out from Canada to Australia that year, 987 of them went to Whistler. Like, it was just like
mini Australia. I remember really that. It wasn't until I moved to Vancouver Island that I had any Canadian friends. Yeah.
Canada's an extraordinary place, you know, and if you can get out of, I guess, you know, going to Whistler can be a little like just going to Earl's Court in London. Like, you can go to the other side of the world and not know what it's like to be of that country, if you surround yourself culturally with things that are overly familiar, and blokes who are wearing a T-shirt that says "load by day, loaded by night." It was one of my lifty friends had that. But Vancouver Island, Van Island's amazing, and you know, just to be around that kind of nature, and a surf school in that water, ambitious.
Oh, yeah, it was cold. It was cold. I had a 5'4" wetsuit, and I'd feel the cold even with that.
Did you get in the water a lot?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I tried to surf as much as I could, and, you know, we were always out. But it was, like you said, just the wilderness there was amazing, you know, being surrounded by bald eagles and bears and, you know, cougars. Not that I ever saw one, but, you know.
And orca. Let's not forget orca. Orcas, like, you're in the water with orca.
Yeah. I never got to see an orca, but I always wanted to. But, whales at great
I don't know, man. Like a shark in surfing is one thing. An orca? This is an animal that needs to eat a seal a day to stay alive.
I remember when I first moved over to there, some friends showed me this video, and there was, some orcas came into one of the bays there while there was a bunch of surfers, and you just see them all go, oh, what's that in the distance? Oh, uh-oh. And then you see them starting to like panic and paddle very quickly to shore.
Well, they hunt in packs. They're wolves of the water. It's not like a shark that's solo. They will coordinate and communicate with each other. And
totally. I know. As beautiful as they are, I've got a lot of respect for them.
Oh, they're very, And I don't know, what's a great idea? I don't know, let's put them in a massive fish tank and have them jump out of a pool and grab fish for tourists. Nope. Bad idea.
Terrible idea. I saw that documentary Blackfish. It was heartbreaking.
Bad idea. So look, you're in the ocean, you're in the snow, there's, bears. Like, how do you get to Camels? Like, what happens?
I still wonder this myself. Because I hadn't actually really done any of the outback in Australia.
Right.
I'd traveled, lots of different places around the world, and I hadn't done the outback at all. And I actually never really had much of a desire to. I sort of thought, oh, it'll always be there, and, it's only oldies, that travel the outback. And it wasn't until I moved down to Adelaide with my ex-boyfriend at the time, who was in the army, and that was my first taste of going into the outback, because I ended up walking part of the Hyson Trail, which is up north in the Flinders Ranges. And I remember driving into the outback and going, how would why would anyone want to live here? And it's so dry. And so I kind of find it funny that then, a couple of years later, I circled back and ended up, doing such a big walk in the outback.
It is interesting that so many people go overseas before they explore here, and yet having been, to parts of the world where this happens, there's really not many, if any, places in the world left that you can be in proper wilderness, like wilderness that the isolation will kill you before a militia does. Like you can go to a desert on the other side of the world and you're probably more likely to run into trouble with someone with an AK-47 than you are to run out of water, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's same for Northern Territory, the same for jungle, same for, like far north, tip of Queensland. Like there's wilderness in Australia that's just not full of guerrillas. I'm talking the gun-toting rebel types. Because that's all, like there's wilderness in like PNG, like Sumatra, like it's all there, but it's so terrifyingly fringes of society. But here in Australia, you can do that. Like it's still super dangerous. You can still absolutely die, no problem at all, like just from being an idiot, or not even, or just from sheer bad luck. But it's going to be because of that, and not because of some rebel with a Russian weapon is going to ask you for this.
I often think that just, how lucky I've been, and how lucky we are, I think, in general in Australia, to have that pure, pristine wilderness out there, to be able to go into a landscape where you can look 360 degrees around you and just see wide open horizons, nothing, no sign of man anywhere. That is, in this day and age, so incredibly special. And I guess that's what I sort of fell in love with.
Yeah, you've written a book about your adventures called The Crossing, and what you just described is something that happened to me for the first time in 2000 when I went out to Central Australia for the first time, and I had never experienced it before, to look in every direction and see no man-made object other than the track that I had travelled in on, and how immensely tiny I felt. You just can't. What was it like for you the first time that happened?
I'm skipping forward a little bit here, because I really had that feeling for the first time when I was out with the camels on my own, and I'd experienced, I had, in the years leading up to my trip, I'd worked with camels for about 4 years, so I had been in the outback for a while, and seen those wide places. But I always remember when I was just on my own with my camels, setting off into the Great Victoria Desert, which was sort of the big desert crossing I did. The Great Victoria is Australia's largest desert, and having this feeling, I think as well, especially when you're walking and traveling on foot, you all of a sudden, when there's no sign of any human stuff or humans or towns anywhere, you have this sudden feeling of vulnerability. Like I was just this tiny little object in this huge, vast space, me and my camels. And it was surprisingly, because I loved nature and I loved the outback already. I was surprised at how terrifying that feeling was, actually letting go of, the last signs of anything.
Yeah. You worked at that kind of interesting camel ranch near Uluru for a little while, if I'm not mistaken, didn't you?
I did. So I worked taking tours around the rock, sunrise and, well, not around the rock, but yeah, sunrise and sunset tours near the rock. And that's where my camels came from, actually. They were mustered from the wild out there.
You can't be in that part of Australia and not have intimate and up close and really personal kind of interaction with the local community and the people whose land it is. What, I guess, was your biggest misconception, having come from Brisbane and been in Adelaide and been around the world? What was your biggest misconception that you had busted having those interactions?
In terms of with Aboriginal people?
Yeah, with the First Nations people.
It was really interesting because I remember moving out to Uluru and thinking, I'm so excited to have some Aboriginal friends. Like, I felt so removed from Indigenous culture, having grown up in Brisbane. Like, there was no one I knew growing up that was Indigenous, and I just had no, it was spoken about on the TV, but I had no personal relationship.
It was never spoken about positively. Come on, it was Queensland, man. It was bad news.
And so when I moved out to Uluru, I was sort of disappointed, I guess, a little bit in a way, and I think it was just partly because it was quite separate at Uluru. There was everyone working in tourism out there, so me working at the camel farm. And then there was the Indigenous community, which was a closed community, and in those areas, the culture is still really strong. So they would speak Pitjantjatjara, and you'd see them coming into the shops, and they would be chatting away. And so it was just two different worlds in a way, but fascinating. I became fascinated seeing that, and it wasn't actually until I met my friend Greg, who worked at Uluru, and Greg was from Rocky. He was an Indigenous guy, but he had actually spent time out there in communities, and he could speak a bit of Pitjantjatjara and Yankunytjatjara, and he started to teach me words. And that was just, my first tiny little introduction into it. And, there's a real, I started to feel like in those landscapes, just how powerful that sense of connection to place is. There was parts out at Katajuda, which is the Olgas, and also parts Rainbow Valley. I remember visiting outside Alice Springs, where I remember going camping there and just having this feeling like the land was just humming with this incredible energy, like energy from ceremonies that had passed. And I thought, well, this is just such a powerful culture.
And so intertwined with survival and daily life. Every story, every song is not only underscores from the very little I know, though. So if you don't know all of it, the very little I know, every story, every song underscores not only the kind of the rules-based systems that keep the community together, but also how to sustain life as the seasons go. And this is the song that we sing at this time of year because these are the foods that keep us alive, and these are the stories we tell at this time of year because this is when we have to get up and go over there to make sure that we can stay alive over the winter or whatever it may be. And to understand that from a Western point of view and certainly a time point of view, I think, as well. As I've talked about this before. It's like the first time I saw Uluru, I started crying. I was just like, I've seen cathedrals. I've stood at the Western Wall in Jerusalem. I've never been so overcome with the spiritual significance of a place. I didn't have some sort of, intervention. The sun didn't shine down for me. It was just being and reflecting
huge
upon.
Power, yeah.
How could you not worship that?
Yeah.
How could you not have that as the center of your universe?
Yeah.
How could that this bringer of life? Because that's where the water collects around the base of Uluru. Like, and you just, how could you not want to look after it? How could you not be careful around it? And how could you not be completely fucked off when someone comes and builds a campground at the foot of it, and when people want to climb all over it? Like, how could you not be super angry?
And I was taking camel tours the year that the climb shut, actually, on the rocks. So it was a fascinating time in history to be there too, because I would take people out on these sunrise or sunset rides, and it was really interesting. It was, it was very half though. You'd get some Australians that were out there going, I've never, I thought I'd come out here and climb it because this was the last opportunity I'd get to climb it. And then you'd have the other half of the string going, we would never want to do anything like that. We would never want to climb it. So
well,
yeah.
I think what you're talking about there, that's an education situation. That's an education issue. It's like we were, it was given an English name and it was art rock. And it was, we get to climb all over things because we are the masters of science. We created agriculture. Da, 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 da. It's not seen or educated as in like, oh, no. This is essentially, I don't know, what do you want to call it? This is the, whatever the rock is in Mecca. It's like, you're not going to be standing all over that, are you? Like, people would be pretty pissed off if you did.
Totally. And I remember my friend Greg, the Aboriginal guy that I knew, I remember him, telling people on these camel tours about what it meant to him and what it meant to his culture and just what a, huge importance it was. And yeah, he would have people on the strings of camels, almost in tears. And he even had someone actually who had collected sort of sand from the area, and it's really bad juju to do that, to collect anything and take it home. And these tourists, they ended up sending the sand back to Greg and say, with all these letters saying, "We're so sorry, please put this back at the rock." And
Yeah, it's just an education, just having empathy and understanding that just because something means this to a Western eye doesn't mean. And certainly the other thing I was going to say is, you talked about being at Rainbow Valley. I was lucky enough to have been there once. The story and the significance of this place has not changed in 60,000 years. It's not like, oh, in the old days we used to do this. No. It's the same as it ever was. And this story is as significant, as important today as it was to the person that first told it. And so this idea of then displacement from place starts to be extraordinarily damaging culturally. But this is we were never told that. We were never understood that. Nor did anyone ever give a shit to ask.
Yeah. I mean, it's changing a lot now, but yeah, I remember it was just never, it was never spoken about when I was at school and I wasn't exposed to it growing up. And so.
It's extraordinary. We are so lucky to be in this country and so lucky to live in a time in history where, our Indigenous culture is starting to be valued in a way that has never been valued by the Western side of things before. There's a few times in my career, Sophie, to change gears a little bit, there's a few times in my career when I've looked people in the eye and said, I'm going to do this. And they look at me and go, well, because nothing I'm going to say is going to stop you. But yeah, you are. Whether it succeeds or fails, I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter to you, clearly. Off your pop, Do you remember the first time you said to someone, this is what I'm going to do?
I don't know that I specifically remember the first time, but I remember people having that sort of like, oh yeah, okay. Like, you're going to walk across Australia with camels, and just that vacant look, I guess, in their eyes where you could tell that they did not think that I was serious, and that they thought, oh, well, we'll just humour her for this, she'll give it up soon, it'll be too hard. It'll be hard to get the camels, it's too big a thing. She won't do it.
Because you can't be what you can't see. Like, the idea didn't come out of what was there an inspiration behind it? Did you want to follow in the lines of like possibly the greatest, most tautological expedition ever named, the Victorian Exploring Expedition, set up by the Expedition Society of Victoria? I'm not even joking. That was like that's exactly what it was called. What was it that you went, that's a thing. I could do a version of that.
I think it was almost like a slow progression, the idea, a little bit, in a way. I mean, it was partly I had been working with camels for, about 4 years, and as soon as I fell in love with them, I just thought, these animals are fantastic. And then I started to hear about other people who had done big camel trips, and, you start to realise how capable they are as an animal for doing an expedition in Australia,
Is there a Facebook group of the cameling community?
There actually genuinely is. There's a Cameliers community on Facebook. Yeah, I loved it, So in some ways it seemed totally normal. And I think, but it also just came at this time of my life, I guess, that was just, I don't know, ripe for it. It was, I wasn't ready to settle down. I was wanting to prove myself, I guess, in a way. Not really for anyone else, but more to myself. I hadn't really found my place in film and TV. I'd sort of been a jack of all trades, master of none, but couldn't really find exactly what I wanted to do. But I wanted to do some big thing in my life, and I just stumbled into camels And camels brought with them this weird sense of certainty, I guess. I had never been, like I said, I'd never been certain of where I wanted to go in film and TVs. And then when I met the camels, they had this amazing sort of calm presence. And I thought, this makes no sense to me whatsoever. I have no idea where I'm going with this job with camels, but I'm fascinated by it. And for once, I actually just followed that fascination and that desire, and it felt really right. And yeah, and it was the most certain I've ever been about anything. I was so certain that I was going to do this.
That's so fantastic. Because you mentioned you were working with camels. Some of that was overseas. You were in the States, I think. You were working with a camel herd in Texas.
Yeah, so I ended up so with my ex-boyfriend, we had this big trip planned and went down the west coast of the States in a camper van, and then I wasn't ready to come home still. I still had these itchy feet. And so through the Cameliers Facebook, partly,
yes.
I thought, well, what's everyone else doing with camels overseas? And so I ended up going to stay with a Mennonite family in Michigan. And I volunteered helping them milk their camels for about a month. And it was possibly the most culturally interesting experience I have ever had.
I don't know anything about Mennonites. Is that somewhat Amish?
Yes,
like, what is it?
Exactly. So this couple, they had been married in the Amish faith, and then they had turned Mennonite. So it's exactly like Amish, except that they have embraced technology in the sense they had a computer, they did have a TV, they had a car, but otherwise very Amish in the belief system.
It is. I'm only learning more. I'm learning more about Amish. I don't know how, but like they will use technology if the technology serves them to do the things that they want to do, which is have every meal with their family. That's like the family is the most important thing. So if having, say, for example, a phone helps them have every meal with their family, they'll ask the leader of their church, "Can I get a phone?" And they'll go, "Well, all right, but it's just a one you can't use as a smartphone. It has to stay in you can't be in the house."
Yes, sometimes they have phone houses outdoor from the house. Yeah. Yeah, there seems to be different rules for Amish. I think there's, some very strict Amish, and then there's a little bit more loose Amish. But yeah, the family I stayed with, I remember them, there was a truck turned up with the bottles of the milk, for the camel's milk. And he turned up on a Sunday, and Marlon said, "Look, you're welcome to camp overnight. You're welcome to join us for dinner, but we will not be unloading the truck because it's Sunday, and Sunday is a day of rest." So yeah, it was, it was just...
The camels stayed on the truck?
No, sorry, it wasn't the camels on the truck. It was milk bottles for the camel milk on the truck. Okay. But yeah, it was that, that kind of, belief about, family. And I even went to church with them wearing a bonnet and everything. It was, it was great. I loved it.
So I haven't eaten dairy in a long time. I had an ex-girlfriend that was lactose intolerant, and I stopped eating. So it was the first thing I stopped eating sometime in the mid-90s. So I know how cows get milked. I have no idea how goats get milked, but I know that goat milk is available. I have no idea how camels get milked.
So mostly in the Western world, it's from machine, just like cows. When I went to India, I saw the nomads milk their camels, and they do it all by hand. And I tell you what, they are like more efficient than a machine. They could milk a camel faster than a machine could. They were amazing.
I'm sure that the animals don't mind it. The animals are okay with it a bit more
they would as well. They would balance their pot on one knee because they would be travelling around with their camels. So basically they had virtually no possessions, bar these beautiful stainless steel pots that they'd carry around. They'd balance that on one knee, and they would have the camel calf would come and suckle on one side of that camel's udder, and then they would be standing on the other side balancing this pot, and they would milk the other two teats as that little baby camel sucked. So yeah, it was, and they would just do it open out in the field, no restraints, nothing.
Wow, because I do know that like it's a highly prized product, camel milk in some parts of the world, and I'm sure people realise this, but there's feral camels all over the inside of Australia. They're worse than brumbies, because they're they're the crown of thorn starfish of the desert. Like they will just live everywhere, and they really are.
I'd sort of argue we've got a lot of feral animals, in Australia.
They're not as bad as cats. My God, no, cats.
They're not as bad. Exactly.
Cats are the worst.
I was about to say that.
Cats are cats are terrible. terribly bad, like catastrophically bad.
Yes,
Cats are
good one.
so. Even your cat that lives in your house that you go, oh no, little Snuffles,
Wouldn't do
she's
this.
fine. No, she's fucking the reason that we don't have ringtail possums in the backyard. Like that is what that is the reason. And yes, the one that sits on your lap while you're watching your maths or whatever, your cat, yes, your cat fucking kills everything in the neighborhood. They are land sharks. And feral versions, when they go feral, they're like pigs. They go, oh, I'm wild, and some gene expression turns on.
Yep, and they become massive.
Beasts, terrifying animals. But camels, okay, let's say this. They're the lantana.
Like that's a good way to describe it, yes.
They can live, they smell lovely, but can live everywhere. And they're all over the internal parts of Australia. Definitely. And so they're also the initial bloodline that came over here in the 1860s. So they're very highly prized overseas. But mustering them, I mean, you're not Robert Redford horse whispering. Like, I'm guessing it's a long way. We've seen breaking a horse, all right, and what we're kind of familiar with how you break a horse. Terrible word, but it's what happens. Like breaking a camel this is an animal that's 10 times bigger.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it is the same. And I learnt from some pretty traditional guys, really. I'm sure that there is ways, these days with horse breaking, there's a lot of ways that, you can go softer and more gently and slower. I sort of learnt from the old camel guys. It was sort of just, you just whack a halter on, you tie them up. I mean, it sounds terrible, but camels as well, I think that they actually domesticate, I think, better than a horse. They have less sort of fire. Camels have this, you'll see a camel sort of sitting down and they tuck their front legs and back legs in underneath them in this little sort of sphinx-like position. So a camel that has just had enough or doesn't know what to do next, that's just their natural position, is to sit down like that.
Oh my God, I just had this flash of every really hard yoga class that I've done where they can see me struggling and they will just quietly say from the front while I'm over the kind of corner, like a child's pose is always available to you. You've just described a camel going in a child's pose, like, too hard.
100%. It is 100%
awesome.
like that. They're like, I don't know how else to fight, so I'm just going to sit down. Even mustering, sometimes they will just. I've been behind one, in a little buggy. All the other camels are running, and this poor old bull goes, I've got no more. I'm just going to sit down. And you can.
Wow. And you can't pull it. Like
they can be incredibly stubborn. But I mean, they can be incredibly stubborn, but then I also think they can be incredibly compliant for animals that are, 750 to 800 kilos.
My God.
I think it's all about getting to know the individual camel too.
Yeah.
They all have different personalities, and when you start to sort of work out, what each of them are like, then you work with each of them, individually.
As the momentum of your trip started to ramp up, was there a moment that you found, I can't change course, I can't change direction now, like this is going to happen, no matter how scared I am?
Yeah, that's a really good way of describing it, actually, because I remember feeling like once I had got the camels and once I'd got right into the training of the camels and then started, speaking to station owners and getting permission to walk across their land, and I remember just feeling like, oh my God, I'm on a treadmill and there's no getting off the treadmill.
Yeah.
Whether I wanted to go or not, it was kind of like, oh shit, I'm committed now and I'm walking on this treadmill and there's no getting off.
Just for people, because people listen overseas, you say station owners. Now let's just talk about the size of what we're talking about here. So what are the sizes of some of these stations that you're talking about? We're talking cattle stations mostly, or sheep stations, which is another word for a fucking massive farm.
Yeah, ranch is what they call them in America.
Ranch is another word. What's the scale of these, and what were those conversations like? Were they on the phone? Were they email?
Yeah, they were on the phone. There was some awkward conversations because you're almost basically cold calling people, and so these stations are, I walked across stations that were 1 million acres, and I remember calling up and being like, I'm doing a bit of a camel trek, and I've got 5 camels, and look, I was just wondering whether it might be okay if I could walk across your land. Is that all right? It was really still, awkward, and thankfully most, pretty much everyone was just like, oh yeah, no worries. and I think the station owners too, who sort of see camels out there all the time, a lot of them almost, it didn't seem like a big deal to them. They're like, oh yeah, we had some guy come through with camels about 10 years back. Oh yeah, no worries, that shouldn't be a problem.
Wow. Would they say, look, do you need anything? Or look, there's some water here?
Yeah, look, absolutely. So once I got to those stations, and I sort of, was in touch with them a bit more regularly, because I did that initial cold call, and then I'd sort of send an email and sort of say, look, I'll let you know, because I didn't know exactly, I didn't know how quickly I'd be traveling, so I didn't know when I would get there. So I'd often call people and say, look, I'm a week out, probably get there, maybe next Wednesday or Tuesday, I think. And then, people were, they would tell me exactly what gate I needed to go through, where the water points were on their station. I had station owners bring out hay bales, hours drive. They would, it was people bent over backwards. It was insane to see.
On their own land. Let's just be clear. This is hours of driving on their own
land half the time. Yeah.
So you're talking countries that are as big as, like, I don't know, this is getting an output here. Like Brunei is the size of the country of Brunei is 5,765 square kilometers. Fucking hell.
Yeah. Yeah,
that is
crazy.
There's a lot of land.
Yeah,
that is
I walked
a lot
across
of land.
Anna Creek Station, which is the world's largest cattle station. I almost had the camels take off on me there, and I thought, this would not be a good place to lose them.
Yeah, because you're right about that. You're right about this moment that, I mean, you're in a cattle station now, so now we're bearing in mind that these are cows that they're just out there, and every now and again they figure out how many they want to muster, and they pull them all in together, and that's what happens. And so cows can literally be on this station for years with the station owners having never laid eyes on them ever.
Wild cattle,
and no idea where they are. Feral cattle. And so you've got your camels, they're used to you, not used to cattle, certainly not wild cattle, who are going, who are you and what are you doing in my backyard? And was it a moo? Was it a cow in a bush? Like, what was it that spooked your camels?
Yeah, a cow in a dark space. I think the thing is with camels, I mean, they'd come off a cattle property, but I think that they'd only ever looked at them from a distance, and I was sort of amazed at how many things in the early days used to scare my camels. Just a cute little baby goat. They were scared of, a miniature pony on someone's station. They were scared of a flapping tarp of a shed. They were really spooky still in the early days. And this day that I was walking, it was a dark cow in the bushes in a sort of dry creek bed, and they must have just seen it as, a movement out of the corner of their eye, and it was a monster. And, all of a sudden the lead rope went tight and I was being dragged along until I got face down in the dirt and basically realised I could not hold on to that lead rope any longer. And I let go and watched all my camels kind of topple over one another because they're all linked together with ropes. So watched them topple over one another, saw sort of gear start to fall off them. And then they got back up, they recovered, and then they just bolted. And, I mean, camels walk really slow, but when they run, they can run, 40K an hour. I mean, they might not have been running that fast then because they had gear on, but they can run. They can run fast.
As you're watching your camels, fly off over a hill, I'm imagining it was very much like Tom Hanks watching Wilson go over the waves. Like, what happens? Because that's your sat phone, your water, that's everything.
Everything. I know, I'd been so stupid. I'd sort of become complacent over the last couple of months and had sort of thought, I don't need to carry the sat phone on me. I don't need to carry the EPIRB on me even. And I'd packed it all away in saddlebags. I thought, I don't even need to carry water on me. That's the great thing about walking with camels is they carry it all for you. And as I was running after them, I suddenly realised how stupid I'd become and that I didn't even have a drop of water on me. All I had was my pocket knife. And I remember thinking, if I don't get these guys back, well, for one, how incredibly dangerous it would be for them. You've got 5 camels loaded with gear, that can't survive in a situation like that in the wild. They're all tied to one another, so it would have been incredibly dangerous for them, and for me as well. I don't know, I would have had to somehow try and navigate back to a road, which I was at the time going cross country. I had no idea where I was in the bush.
I don't want to blow how you made it out for the, I don't want to spoil the book, but you're here and we're talking. So,
I did make it back.
Something figured out, but how you did it is pretty interesting. That's just one kind of peak moment, but there would have been moments every day when you are faced. We are rarely, as in our comfortable life, we are rarely faced with true challenge and true having to accept humility in order to survive. What was being exposed, deliberately exposing yourself to that amount of, I don't want to say humiliation, like in a way of like that amount of like having to be humble before the face of, everything. What did that start to do to who you felt you were and your personality and how you looked at the world?
I think it really taught me, and I think partly the camels sort of helped with this. It taught me to, it sounds really stupid and corny considering what I did. It taught me to put one foot in front of the other, because I always had the responsibility of the camels, and it was, you were never given, I was never given an opportunity to be able to fall in a heap and start crying. I mean, I did many times, but then I got to the point where I thought, you can't just lay here crying because we're not in a good camp right now. Tomorrow you have to get up and you have to get these camels to a better place that's got better feed for them, that's in a better situation for them. So it really taught me to kind of to push through and to keep on moving forward. And that was a massive takeaway. And then I guess through that, really learning how strong I was. I think I sort of realized I'd never been pushed. I'd never pushed myself. And there's so much value to pushing yourself, both physically, mentally, or pushing your comfort zones, because it makes those tiny moments of joy so much better. And that's the thing I think I love now and really appreciate about doing, I guess, harder travel, is that by having that long day walking or that hot day walking or, surviving a tough situation, it makes just sitting down at the end of the day having a cup of tea seem like the best thing in the world. It really makes you appreciate that.
Being forced to look at the bigger picture in a moment of crisis is not, our brains can trap us in that moment of crisis and can trap us in this, our brains can trap us in this space of like, this situation is how it's always going to be forever and there's nothing you can do at all. But being forced into that, you're like, well, you clearly see what's in front of you is like, actually nothing's going to change unless I do something. And doing something is the only way out of here.
Definitely. Yeah. I remember having this one specific time, it was maybe 2 weeks in, and I had a really rough start to the beginning of the trip. And it was really poor country I was traveling through in terms of it was during a drought. There was barely any feed for the camels. It was hot. The camels were new. The camels started really losing a lot of weight. And so I was sort of seeing them get super skinny in front of my eyes. And I had just done, it was, bad camp after bad camp after bad camp in terms of camel feed. And I got to this one camp and I just thought, there is not an ounce of feed here for my camels. And they sat down in the shade and just looked so dejected. And I remember crying on the tarp as, my little home in the bush, and just being like, I'm so sorry that I've taken you on this awful adventure, crying to the camels. And like you said, I could have stayed there trapped for hours, but I knew I had to kind of look at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture I thought was, at the end, once I'd had my cry, I thought, none of us are hurt. None of us have broken anything. We're all still capable, able. Nothing's gone drastically wrong. We have food, we have water. Tomorrow is a new day and we just have to get up and we just have to go for a walk. and hopefully we'll be in a better situation. And it really sort of became, I guess, a bit my mantra for the trip. It was like, you know what, every day all I've got to do is get up and go for a walk. It wasn't about doing the whole country. It was never about, we're going to Byron, it's 5,000 kilometres. It was just literally about, today we're going to go for a walk. I'm going to go for a walk with my camels. I can do that. That's easy.
That's amazing for you to break it down to that. It really is what you're saying. It's like just simply just take the next step. That's the only thing you have to do, and you're perfectly capable of doing that. And that's relatable. Not everyone listening, I say nobody listening is going to walk across Australia alone, female alone, with 5 camels across the country. No, not going to happen. Yet everyone is faced with something today that they're going, oh, fuck, no, I can't fucking deal with this. The value of just going, identifying, once you've had your moment, once, and that we all have the moment. I have the moments. I had one this morning. Once the flood kind of passes, once the flood of, reaction hormones, whether they be angry or sad hormones passes, what's the tiniest movement in the direction towards which way you want to go? And that's literally all you have to do.
Yeah.
Because then you get there and you just do it 100%,
again. Yeah. I mean, I was sort of lucky, I guess, in a way that I had very few people out there. So there was definitely moments, like you said, where you're in that emotion, whether it be sadness or anger. And I had a few angry ones where I would just let out the most almighty scream in the middle of the desert because I was able to do that because no one was listening.
You mentioned sleeping on a tarp. For folks who've never seen it, and it's funny because Wolfie's watching Madagascar, that movie, at the moment. It's just kind of happening a lot at our place right now. And there's a gag and they go, oh, look, the star is out, because they're in the zoo in the middle of Manhattan, right? I remember the first time I saw the night sky in the Outback. It was outside of Longreach. What's the sky like at night out there?
Oh, I mean, it's something else. And I remember I started to learn all the stars. It was this real feeling of, and I guess this is maybe subconsciously what I wanted from the trip, but I didn't really realize until I was out there how much joy I would get from it. And that was feeling really attuned to nature and knowing, what was happening every night with the night sky. I knew whether it was going to be a full moon or whether the moon was getting up, a couple of hours into the night, or I knew when the saucepan was rising, or I knew where Jupiter and Saturn was and some of the other stars. And just having that real feeling of, I guess, being orientated with my natural surroundings. And that was, so, so special. And the stars become like your friends in that sense, I guess, because, every night you go, oh, yep, there's the saucepan, there's Bellatrix, there's Beetlejuice, there's, and you can start to name them all. And I found this actually, and I mean, I'm speaking as a white woman, I don't know, but I guess that's the feeling that Indigenous people have. And when I met some of the community members out in the Great Victoria Desert from Oak Valley community, I loved the fact that they had this name. I was telling them about all these dust storms that kept coming, it was this horrible hot wind that we kept having this weather from. And one of the ladies said, oh, that wind is called Piria. And I thought, oh, that's so cool that they have, certain words for that specific wind that comes down from the western and northern deserts, and that feeling of connection to all of those elements.
What you're describing, like being in the understanding that we as humans, as much as we're trying to separate ourselves in, walls with right angles and screens and electricity and whatever, we are a part of a much bigger system. And that bigger system extends trillions of light years up from our top of our heads. And it's undeniable. We can't survive without any of it. It can survive without us, but we can't survive without any of it. You mentioned one of the station owners says, oh, yeah, we had a bloke walk through here a couple of years back. It's one thing for it's one thing for me as a white man to walk down the street alone at night. It's one thing for my wife or my eldest, who's 19 now, to walk down the street alone at night in any city in the world. To walk across a desert as a woman alone, like we've all seen Wolf Creek. There's danger. There's not danger. that's some pretty frightening stuff if you really kind of scratch the surface.
I guess I never saw it like that. I mean, yeah, I know. I just think that there's such a preconceived idea about the outback from movies like Wolf Creek. Gosh, got a lot to answer for. That just show that there's, so much badness in the outback, and it's so not the case. I think it's such a false notion, and there's so many places I walk through. There's no one out there. No one would know that I was even there. And if they did, it was maybe one station owner at the time. No one, otherwise they didn't really know where I was traveling, where I was going to, and so I actually never went into it feeling particularly unsafe in that way. And I think I've always felt quite sort of safe in general in nature. And I mean, yeah, there's definitely been moments, when I was out there where, someone would come by, camp in the night. You're sort of a little bit, I guess, on edge. And I really learned to not judge a book by its cover, because I was constantly wrong every time. I was passed by a bunch of motorcyclists on the edge of the desert, and they came by and, gave me a beer, and we sat around the fire and had a beer, and then they carried on their motorbike tour, or one time it was actually my friend Greg turned up to help deliver water for me and my camels, and so, yeah, there's always, I guess, a little bit of that, feeling, but mainly it's just your subconscious. Yeah. It's just, we play these tricks on ourselves.
But I would also say to you, Sophie, you're the kind of woman the kind of person who goes, I'm going to walk across Australia and I'll be fine. I've heard stories of criminals who have done like street crime, like muggings and things like that, and showing them pictures of people walking, shot only from the waist up, vision of people walking. So telling just by the way they walk, their feet, their hips down, going, no, easy, no, yes. Like there's something that we signal in the way that we move that shows vulnerability, or we're not vulnerable. So I'm guessing you're clearly walking with purpose. You're walking with an energy about you. And plus you've got 3,000 kilos of cranky camel to unleash.
Yeah. I did have some guns as well. So
you took some firearms?
Yeah. I mean, I had to take them for wild camels out there. So not that I would ever, and it's so funny. People are like, oh, well, it's good that you had the guns. I thought, God, I would never want to be in that situation where I'd ever think about using the guns in terms of self-defense, against another human. Never. But, I don't know whether that, I guess like you said, I had 5 big camels with a lot of gear and a lot of, purpose.
To embark on a journey like this and, to understand that it's just a step at a time. I'm lucky enough to have run a couple of endurance marathons. And there's a point where at 38 Ks of 42, you're like, I'm fucked. And then at 38 and a half, you realize, hang on, it's 3.5 Ks to go. I can run 3.5 Ks in my sleep. And then everything about you changes, and you have access and resources to just this whole new world of energy and ability that you otherwise, and you just you speed up as you get towards the end. Is there a mindset shift that starts to happen as you kind of get closer to the East Coast?
Yeah, for sure. I remember out in the Great Victoria Desert, I had a real it was funny, people are like, oh, how does that affect you being out there on your own, what does that do to your mental state? There is a part of you that does go, I guess, a little bit crazy. And my crazy thing was I just became obsessive over numbers. Weirdly so, because I don't think of myself as a numbers person, but I was obsessed with how many Ks I was going to do every day, what time I would get up, how long the camels would graze for, what time I would get them in from grazing, how much water we would carry, even though I knew all of these times, and then some of them didn't matter either. I would go over how much weight each single camel was carrying. And I would play these numbers again and again over in my head, obsessively so. And then somewhere towards sort of the second half of my journey, I realised that I had sort of let that go, and that I was all of a sudden going with the flow and kind of living in the moment. And I was less obsessed with this whole, okay, today, you've got to get up, you've got to get the camels at this time, we're going to walk this number of Ks. I became less structured, and I realized that I suddenly was actually enjoying myself, believe it or not. And then I almost, rather than pushing forward, I almost started to pull back. I started to go,
Right.
oh, we don't need to do that many Ks today. We could camp here. We could stretch this out. We could, it might take us 3 weeks rather than 2. That doesn't matter, because I was just enjoying so much being out there.
There's something to be said for and I understand when you're in that situation early on, when you're looking to control as many controllables as you can for a sense of...
Yeah, I think that's what it is, a sense of control in a situation that you can never control. You're in a wild environment.
But there's also the part of like, well, I can't control any of that or that or that or that or that. That's just now my brain's just doing a spinny beach ball that my computer does when I put too many tabs open. Meh, I can close them all. This is the part that I can do. I can do the walking forward part.
Totally, exactly. That's
it's hard.
Exactly it.
It's hard to get there and to trust that everyone else is going to do the right thing. It's hard to get there.
Sometimes it takes about 4,000 kilometres to get there, I think, but I got there in the end.
For all of their faults, and it's a terrible book. There's a book by Motley Crue called The Dirt. It's frightful to read, and in a great and terrible way. But there's a moment where Tommy Lee, for all his faults, he says, I wish someone wrote a book, here's what to do once you get off tour. Because I did relate to that. We used to do very intense periods of work, both with Channel V with the music stuff and also shows like Australian Idol, when it would just be like everything for months, day in, day out, all day. And then fireworks, bye.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, what do I do now? I try to go on holiday, but I couldn't feel relaxed because I was at 38,000 RPMs, just trying, and I didn't know what to do. Like when you touch the Pacific Ocean, you put your camels back on a special truck and they're heading back to Adelaide, like what do you do?
Yeah, I think that's often not spoken about, and I often, wonder that with other adventurers how, because the ending in a way can be a little bit of an anticlimax. Everyone's kind of hyping it up, going, how you feeling? How you feeling about finishing? And everyone's expecting this to be this massive crescendo when the journey's already happened. The journey is in the walking every step of it. It's in the moments, along the way, not really in the ending, not in the touching of the Pacific Ocean. In a way, I had started to realise that the journey had ended a little bit before I got to Byron. And because I went out there with the camels, really I wanted to experience those wild places in Australia that we talked about, and I wanted to experience that alone with my animals. And then all of a sudden I got to the busyness of the East Coast, and everything was starting to change. People were, and it was this people were trying to be nice, and everyone was inviting me into their homes and cooking me dinner and all of this. But it was like the challenge was gone, and I was frustrated at that, because it was like, no, I came to do this to camp and to be out under the stars. Thank you for offering your bed, but I didn't do it to sort of stay at everyone's houses along the way. And so, but I realized that that was part of it too, and I had to let go of the fact that I had left the desert and I was into busyness and busy roads. And
I'm kind of overcome with emotion hearing you describe that. The only thing I can relate is having spent time in the Californian desert in a place called Joshua Tree National Park, which is unbelievable.
Joshua Tree's beautiful,
incredible, and then as you start to turn back around, I was starting to go back home to Los Angeles, and then you drive for about 40 minutes, and then there's the first billboard, and you go, oh, it's odd, because suddenly there's this thing there with a logo on it.
Horrible and commercial, and you realise you're back to humanity and the ugliness of it.
Happens again and again, and within an hour you stop noticing. But there's one every your message, like your brain starts to fill up, rather than, wow, look at that bush, that star, that thing, that hill, that like now it's just full of messaging, and it's just I can understand what that would have felt like a couple of weeks prior, as you're edging closer and closer to the civilization or the kind of build-up of people that live closer to the coastline, and what that would have felt like to have to let go of that. But you also touched on something extraordinary, which, sounds like a Thoreau quote, but truly that, like, the end is the end, but the journey was the journey. Like, that's where the value was. It's not in finishing it. Like, I've had Olympians on this show that tell me the gold medal is just the thing. The person I became to get the gold medal, that's it.
Yeah.
What's the person that you were when you started versus the person that you became because of this? What's the difference there?
Oh, I think that's something, I'm still finding out to this day. I think I'm still having, I guess, small little light bulb moments, thinking about what the trip meant to me and how it changed me. And partly, like you said, it's sort of, I realized that the end wasn't really just the end. It was the beginning of new adventures to come, and there would be constantly more things in my life that would change me and progress me and keep me moving forward. So, yeah, it was a realization that it was the journey would carry on. But I think I realized how incredibly strong I was, that I never had realized that before. Also, I have such an appreciation now for my own company and spending time on my own, and I'm really happy and able to do that. I think I sort of always have been, but I guess it really proved that to me. And to know as well, when I look back on the entire journey, I guess, and I look back on how I got into Camels and how random it all was. And like I said at the beginning, the fact that it never really made sense that I was going down this path. I think that, life often doesn't make sense, and just roll with it, because you never know what amazing experiences can come out of it. I mean, so many times I question, like, why am I milking camels? I went to girls' grammar. Should I be being a doctor or a lawyer now? And then when I was on the trip, I was like, why am I doing this? Does anyone even care that I'm out here alone in the desert with my 5 camels? Like, what's the point of all of this? And I've just realized, you'll question yourself constantly, but if you just, I don't know, just give into that uncertainty and just realize that life's somehow got its own strange plan for you, and that will all work out in the end.
Not everyone's, as I said, we've said it a few times, not everyone's going to walk across Australia with 5 camels, and people aren't going to walk across their suburb. What would you say about what it does for you to be in motion, to not be sedentary, to be moving and have a mindset of moving towards something?
I was actually thinking about this today, and I will, if I can, I'm going to read out this quote, which I have in my book, because it's one of my favourite quotes, and that's obviously why I put it in the book. And I think it's a good thing for us all to remind ourselves of. So I cannot pronounce the name of the person who said this, but anyway. Above all, do not lose your desire to walk. Every day I walk myself into a state of well-being and walk away from every illness. I have walked myself into my best thoughts and know no thoughts so burdensome that one cannot walk away from it. Thus, if one keeps on walking, everything will be all right. And that's my quote about walking.
Well, not everyone can walk. Not everyone has the ability, but just to at least to be in motion. Yeah,
exactly. If you take that as being in motion, I think, I don't think I've ever been a very good decision maker, and I think probably that was another thing that this trip taught me is how to just, sometimes you just have to make a decision and move forward. It doesn't matter if it's the wrong decision. You just have to make a decision so that you can move forward. I mean, life is in motion, and we can't just stop and put it on pause. We just have to keep rolling with it and moving forward in the best way that we can at any given moment.
In your experience, the problems that you were anticipating that were stopping you from making that decision, how do they compare to the problems and solutions you find once you're going?
Well, I think the thing is that once you've made that decision, then those problems arise, and then you can deal with those problems. Otherwise you're just staying stuck in that state of indecisiveness, and nothing is getting done. So I think you're better off making some decision rather than any, and then you have to face those problems, whatever they are, and just take them one step at a time and deal with them as they come. I used to stand there at the end of the day trying to work out where to make my camp. And having a good camp or a bad camp in terms of camel feed would make the world of difference to me. If it was a bad camp, I would end up spending all afternoon chasing after the camels as they wandered around, and so I'd stop in this spot and go, oh, do I unload them here or do I keep walking? Will I not find a better camp if I keep walking? Oh, should I just go with this camp here? Or no, maybe there'll be something better further down the track, further down the road. And, I'd be turning around to my 5 camels who'd just be sort of looking at me like, well, what are we doing? Stopping? Do you want to go? Do you want to stay? What do you want to do? And I realized that the only person that could make that decision at this time was me. And that was an incredibly empowering experience. I feel like I'd always been on, I'd always traveled with other people or been on adventures with other people, and you rely on, oh, well, what would you guys want to do?
Yeah.
Would you want to keep going and make camp somewhere else, or would you want to stay? And all of a sudden I realized the camels aren't going to answer me. It's me that's got to make this decision. And I would just have to, I think, quieten and listen to my gut. I've always been a big one for just listening to your gut.
That's extra, and it does remind me, speak about traveling with other people. There's another Thoreau quote about travel. It goes something along the lines of like, whoever travels alone, you're always ready. You travel with someone else, you always have to wait for the other person to be ready.
Yeah.
And bear in mind that if you're traveling with me, you're waiting for me. So it's a drag for you. But let's say Brisbane Girls Grammar hears this, and I don't know if you've already been asked back. Have you been asked back?
I have, amazingly, yeah. So they took an interest in the Camel Trek, and they, printed it in their alumni, emails. And then I actually had all these beautiful messages. They had told the grade 9s, I think, at the time, that were going out on camp, and they had written me all these beautiful messages. And it was so funny, and it was almost like my past self speaking to my future self, because these messages were all like, I don't know, how do you find your passion? I can see that you found your passion. Mum and Dad want me to become a doctor, but I don't think that's what I'm passionate about. I don't know, what I want to do. And I felt like hugging them all and going, I still don't know what I'm doing. I still don't have a clue. I don't have a clue how I ended up with camels half the time, and I still don't know what direction I'm going in, but it doesn't matter, choose the path less travelled. Who knows where you go? It'll be somewhere great in the end.
You're amazing. So thank you so, so much. And there's a guy I'm into at the moment, Kevin Kelly. He wrote, he started Wired magazine. He's just, written some interesting books, but he has this line of like, don't be the best. Don't strive to be the best, strive to be the only. And you're definitely the only. You are the only. And that's brilliant. Cherry on top. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for talking to me today.
Thank you so much, Osher.